I thought I was gonna die. Like, I didn't know if I was gonna come out alive.
Just 1 week ago, a gunman opened fire inside an Orlando nightclub that welcomes the LGBT community.
It's awful to experience this with my fellow family.
At least 49 innocent victims killed and dozens more injured in what is the worst shooting rampage in modern American history. A vigil at Cal Anderson Park on Capitol Hill in the hours after it drew hundreds. An attack designed to create fear. It is also bringing people together.
We will not be intimidated. We will stand together and we will be strong.
The LGBT community is not alone. Muslims in America, they are under attack too, with Seattle area mosques being threatened in the wake of the shootings. This week also marks a sad anniversary. It was just 1 year ago that an avowed racist gunned down 9 African Americans inside their Charleston, South Carolina church during Bible study. This is the beginning of Pride Week in Seattle, a time the LGBT community celebrates the progress it's made. But in the face of last week's attack, it is clear there is still much more to be done. Tonight, we begin the conversation. Where do we go from here?
Pride and Peace, a King 5 Community Forum, live from the Olympic Sculpture Park in Seattle. Now, tonight's moderator, King 5 News anchor, Joyce Taylor.
Good evening and welcome. We're so happy to have you here with us tonight. We are going to be here for the next hour to talk about the impact the Orlando shootings have had on our community. And we want to emphasize to you this is not a political discussion. We know that hate and intolerance, they could be the subject of many a forum, but tonight we are going to focus on the group that is most top of mind right now, and that is our LGBT community. Seattle Pride called the Orlando attack, and I'm quoting, part of a system of violence targeting the LGBTQ community, saying that violent rhetoric and discrimination cause violence. But as we witnessed here in Seattle and across the Northwest, really across the country, not even the horror of Orlando could silence people who for years have been fighting to be seen and heard. This is the very reason for Pride Month, for Pride Week, and this is why we are here tonight. Welcome to our show. We are interested in your thoughts at home. We invite you to participate online on Facebook and Twitter. We have our tech reporter, Brian Westbrook, here. He's going to be taking your comments and your questions online, so please join the conversation today. And now I'm happy to introduce part of our panel tonight. We have with us tonight Pride Fest Director Egan Orion. We also have from Seattle Pride Melissa Garcia and Seattle Mayor Ed Murray, along with our Seattle Police Chief Kathleen O'Toole. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Egan, I want to start with you. It's been an extraordinary week. Your thoughts after just a week and a day after the horror in Orlando?
I don't know if any of us have really even begun to process what's happened. I guess the very first thought that I have is that I've been really heartened to see how the American public in general has reacted to this, because you have, a double minority. You have, queer Latinos that were killed, and yet you see across the board, save for politicians, sorry, we're not going to make it political, who have responded. I mean, if you saw those lines for the blood banks down in Orlando just after the massacre, that just filled me with such hope that we can get past this terrible period. I have a close friend who lost a friend down in Orlando.
Sorry.
Yeah, his name was Shane, and he was beautiful, young, and talented, and had the rest of his life in front of him. And I know that many people here tonight have knew people down in Orlando, so I think it's impossible for us to process it so quickly, and particularly for those of us who work on Pride events. That's our Pride Month is filled with nothing but planning.
Right.
And so we'll process it and we'll process it together. I think that this has made us stronger as a community. At the vigil last Saturday night, just to see the whole community come out, it was a really powerful moment.
Melissa, I know you probably would agree. What an extraordinary sight that was. I'm sure you frequent a lot of those clubs, very much like Pulse, our clubs right here in Seattle. Your thoughts?
Like Egan said, I think it's very hard for the community just to kind of process everything and just, accept that such a tragedy like this has happened, especially, when it's a double minority, like he said, with the Latinx community and then the LGBT community as well.
Do you feel less safe?
I wouldn't say that I per se feel less safe. I think that I've always kind of known that these things are out there. The hatred exists, the discrimination exists, it's there. I think it's all about being, standing up and not being afraid and showing that, us as a community, that we all stand together, and with the word love especially. I think that our community represents love so powerfully. So would I say that I'm afraid or fearful? Definitely not, because then we would be letting them win.
Mayor Murray, you were at Cal Anderson Park.
Mm-hmm.
What a place to be in the hours after that horrible act. What was it like for you to be there to see so many people come out, and what was on your heart that night?
Well, it's difficult, and it was difficult to look out at that crowd and see so many young people and know what they were going through. I think it was the next night, there was a vigil walk from St. Mark's to St. James. And one of the young men, one of the gay Latino young men who was walking with me, asked me, how did Seattle react to Matthew Shepard's death? And it took me back, being somewhat older, it took me back to that tragedy. And at that point, we actually had come to know Matthew Shepard as a person. And so when he died, the grief was tremendous. In this situation, we knew 49 young people were dead, but we are only now getting to know their stories. And this community was so traumatized by Matthew Shepard. The trauma that is happening when you have 49 Matthew Shepards is almost indescribable at this moment. I have probably not seen our community this devastated since the height of the AIDS epidemic. So it is truly a very, very, very significant moment that folks are trying to work through.
And you talk about the 49 lives, young lives lost. Chief O'Toole, more than 100 people were shot. The worst act of domestic terrorism really on our soil since 9/11. How can you protect us from something like this?
Well, the best thing we can do is work very closely with our communities, engage with our communities. Sadly, most of the perpetrators in these situations have demonstrated signs prior to a tragedy. So we really rely on the community to work with us and to provide us information prior to a tragedy so we can prevent and intervene. Believe me, the last thing we as police officers want to do is respond to a horrible tragedy similar to the one in Orlando. But I think I'll echo the sentiments of the others here. I was at Cal Anderson Park. I walked the vigil the next night, and out of all bad comes some good. I mean, it was wonderful to see us come together as a community here in Seattle. Police officers and members of the LGBT community walking shoulder to shoulder, showing that we're going to be resilient, and we're going to work together to prevent tragedies like this from happening again.
The LGBT community is not alone in feeling targeted. The Orlando attacker made dubious claims about his connections to the Islamic State, a group of radical militants. Here in Seattle, police reported threats against the largest mosque in the Puget Sound region, even as their members were supporting the LGBT community at a vigil at Cal Anderson Park and donating blood to help survivors of the attack in Orlando. Muslims across the country have spoken out against the shooting, explicitly calling it a hate crime, including Mahmoud El-Awadi, who said on Facebook, "Yes, my name is Mahmoud, a proud Muslim American. Yes, I donated blood, even though I can't eat or drink anything because it's the holy month of Ramadan. Yes, I'm sad, frustrated, and mad that a crazy guy claimed to be a Muslim did this shameful act." Earlier this year, a proposed mosque in Mukilteo was targeted, with ominous warnings mailed to neighbors and signs defaced, with calls to ban Islam from America. The Orlando tragedy not happened not just during Pride Month, but it also happened during the holy month of Ramadan. And while we still don't know the killer's motivation, we do know that at the very least he was an ISIS sympathizer. So this was yet another act of domestic terrorism linked to the Muslim faith. Joining us now to talk about what this means is Sonia Basha and Aziz Junejo. We really appreciate your time tonight. You were at Cal Anderson Park. You said to the audience that you are Muslim and you are queer and you are here. It was such a powerful statement. Tell us what you meant.
Well, what I meant was that my identity is intersectional. It's complex. There are many parts of myself that make up who I am, and oftentimes they're not recognized, they're not seen, and really they're not visible. And for me, I was just advocating for the fact that in order to move forward and to have progress, we have to understand that there are no monolithic ideas of what a Muslim looks like. There are no one-dimensional ideas of what it means to be in a queer body or identify as queer. But in fact, there are so many parts of ourselves that make up who we are. And in order to really accept one another, we have to accept that.
Welcome back and good evening. If you are just joining us, our focus tonight is Pride Week in the aftermath of the tragedy in Orlando. And joining us, many distinguished guests. We have Egan Orion here from Pride Fest. We also have with us King County Sheriff John Urquhart, Seattle Mayor Ed Murray, our Seattle Police Chief Kathleen O'Toole, and now joining our panel, Alex Banya from Seattle Pride. Thanks to all of you for being here. Mayor, I want to start with you. Some people may never have possibly attended a Seattle Pride or Pride Fest event. Why are these events still important?
You know, it's important because we as a community have always celebrated our diversity. It's a way for us to say who we are. And at this time where we are grieving, and a time when there's fear, it's important that we also celebrate. And this is a community that is always, despite its fear, and fear is always not far away, as I said earlier, and despite our grief, we will celebrate, and we will celebrate our diversity. It is an opportunity for us to be together and to support each other in a very public way. It is a moment of joy, but it is also a political moment of solidarity. Because again, as Harvey Milk said in San Francisco decades ago, the most political thing we can do is to be out, because it sends a message, particularly to young LGBT people, that it is safe to be out.
Alex, you made some big changes to the event this year. Can you tell us about them?
Well, as early as 8 a.m. on Sunday, working through our shock at the news, the board was already thinking of ways that we could make the Pride experience safer for everyone, and to reassure everyone that we were just as concerned for their safety, especially since we didn't know what happened and if it was tied to anything else. We have been meeting with our wonderful partners at the Seattle Police Department. We also have a wonderful security company that we had hired. We've met with everyone. We've redoubled our efforts as far as getting additional personnel. We were very fortunate on Saturday to have our volunteers trained by the Washington Fusion Center, which was an organization I did not know about. It's part of the Homeland Security. And they gave us a lot of useful information. And we've also been reaching out to the people who follow us on Facebook, et cetera, to keep them updated and keep them feeling safe and feeling like they can attend and that it's safe to attend. I'm not a security expert, but I do know that everyone is on board, and I'm probably sure that the chief can probably say more about that.
I talked to my nephew, who lives on Capitol Hill with his partner. My nephew Carvel is gay, and he's lived on Capitol Hill. We've gone to clubs on Capitol Hill for years, and today he shared with me for the first time that he is actually really nervous to attend events this weekend, to go to the clubs, Neighbors, and so many great clubs that are packed this time of year, especially during Pride events. Chief, can you tell us why should we feel like things are going to be safe this weekend? Because people are nervous.
Well, we've actually doubled the number of personnel that we had last year and the previous year for Pride events this year. We're working with our partners, with Sheriff Urquhart and other law enforcement agencies, mutual aid assistance, so they'll be sending personnel into Seattle as well. We've mapped out every imaginable Pride event that will occur on Friday, Saturday, Sunday. We've worked with the organizers. We've worked with different establishments on Capitol Hill. We've been to the different bars to offer them assistance and offer them some additional training. So, you know, it's a good team effort, and I hope that your nephew and others will see our presence out there. We don't want it to look like a police state. We want this to be a wonderful celebration, but we want to be a part of it. I had lots of fun at Pride events last year and the year before, and I intend to have lots of fun this weekend as well.
Best parties ever. That's what I say. I mean, seriously. Have you heard from any of your friends or anyone from the events that you're planning of people concerned more than they would normally be? Of course, you'd expect that in light of the events, but that they're worried here in Seattle that something might happen?
I don't know if it's. I think it's just a general concern. I think when you hear it on the news every night about the details of what happened here, and you have people talking about domestic terrorism, and on the news, I'm not calling out King 5, but making it sort of sensationalistic. Then it's on people's minds constantly. So, yeah, people are a little concerned. I think that there's a real great opportunity for people to face those fears and to come out in solidarity with their community and show that we're not going to cower in the face of this act of hate.
Sheriff, I just wanted to clarify, the Muslim community has worked so hard with law enforcement since 9/11, and we see that a shooter like Omar was not a part of the community. And lo and behold, so many of them in the past who have had trouble are not a part of our community. Islam is practiced in our mosque. We do a great job of being community members and contributing. You made reference to our community needs to work with you, when in fact we do have a gun problem. Canada in the last 20 years has had 8 shootings. We've had 20 mass shootings in a month. We have 23 toddlers who have shot adults since the beginning of this year. We have a gun problem, and it's not necessarily a problem with the Muslim community. I hope you could just readdress it and clarify that, please.
We certainly have a gun problem in this country. We have a violence problem in this country as well, and it's intractable. I don't know how we're going to fix it. I really don't. I don't think there is an easy answer. We're not Canada. We're not England. We're the United States. We have 300 and some million guns for 300 and some million people. How do you solve that problem? Getting back to the fact that this, as I was saying, this happened to be a Muslim that committed this horrible deed. He could have just as easily have been Christian. He just as easily could have been Jewish. He happened to be Muslim. And I'm so sorry that we talk about that so much, because I don't think we should. The Muslim community works very closely with law enforcement, and I hope vice versa.
Yes.
I think it's a great partnership, and we have to do that to protect all of us.
I just want to say the Muslim community, the LGBTQ community, did not implement Muslims, and we just want to thank you for that. This was about gun violence, and you didn't come after us. So we really appreciate that. Thank you so much.
I just want to, we have a professor here from Yale University, and I just, Mark, if you could, we are not going to make this a political forum, but we do have a professor here who can talk about why it's so complicated, this issue around guns. Professor?
Well, the Supreme Court, after a long campaign, just about a decade ago, recognized an individual right under the Second Amendment. But when they recognized the right, they left open all of the crucial questions in terms of what kinds of gun control regulation are going to be upheld and what kinds are going to be struck down. The lower courts are struggling with them. They're making conflicting decisions. The court is very divided. The court has avoided taking these cases. It's quite clear that a lot of gun control regulation is going to pass muster, but it's also possible that some will not. And really, that's why one of the main reasons that we have a short-handed Supreme Court right now is people who feel very strongly in this issue, particularly the NRA and the gun community, are making it very difficult to confirm another justice. And we are going to have to wait and see till we get a full court, till we get some cases taken, exactly what kind of gun control legislation the court's going to allow going forward.
Andrew Siegel from Seattle University, thank you very much. We're going to leave it there on the gun issue because this is not going to be a political.
Can I push back just a little bit?
Yes, Mayor.
Every single morning, I get a briefing from the chief from the night before about what goes on in this city. And this is a fairly low violence city. Every single day, guns are involved. There is a gun problem of proportions that we just don't understand. And I don't think talking about that is a political issue. It is a public safety issue. It is a public health issue.
And because it is a public safety and public health issue, we're going to continue our discussion online, live streaming at the end of this discussion.
Good.
Because we want to focus on Pride Week and Pride Month, and we're going to run out of time. So stick around, and we'll continue that discussion. I promise you. We are going to keep going with this discussion as well.
Thank you.
People, when they think about how we move forward and we get along, Reverend Meeks, I know in your church, which now is very inclusive of the LGBT community, it has not always been that way. No. And when we talk about moving forward, your church is, I think, an example of one way to do that. Tell us what changed in your community, your church community, that made you move in this new direction.
Well, first of all, in the 12 years we've been around, I had never been one who was preaching some sort of anti-gay rhetoric. In fact, in many ways, I avoided the topic because I had this internal conflict with what I felt was a position I had one way to look at. And frankly, I was afraid of coming out with my affirmation because I was afraid of losing my job. I was afraid of basically losing my tribe in many ways. I would be, cast out or what have you. And what changed was, frankly, a close friend of mine who worked on staff with me came out to me. And as she knows me quite well, we go on vacations together and things like this. But when she cried thinking, oh, this is probably my last day working here, my heart broke. And I realized that I've been profiteering from a system of hate. And religious communities often say that they're about love and mercy and compassion. But too often, those things get trumped by a dogmatic view of certain things that I think can blind us to the humanity and the people around us. And so I will always carry deep regret for the years of my life that I participated in hateful, although I wouldn't have used that phrase back then, but I do think I participated in a system that propped up oppression for vulnerable people. And if the way of Jesus is anything other than solidarity for oppressed people groups, then I don't know what it's worth.
When you say you participated in, I want you to tell us what that looks like, because I think people participate in this kind of oppression every day and they don't even know it.
Yeah, well, and especially people like me. I mean, I'm kind of the problem here. White, cisgendered, straight male, Christian in America. And I think a lot of times our privilege blinds us to, because we are beneficiaries of a broken system. And so that was certainly true of me. And until I befriended, ate meals with my Muslim friends, my gay friends, it wasn't until I began to love them in relationship that my heart and my mind was able to open.
How did it change your congregation?
It shrunk it. It was a rough season. We didn't open it up for conversation. The staff was with me wholeheartedly. We'd been in a 5-year process of talking about this anyway before my friend came out. And so I just made a full statement of full inclusion, and we lost, thousands of people and $3 million. But we were committed to this, whatever happened. And I said, this is where we're at and where I'm going to stake my flag. And actually, right now, frankly, I'm having more fun than ever. I love my church.
We are so grateful to you for sharing. I want to toss it over to Margaret Larson because you're with Patrick Evans from Sound mental health.
Yeah, Joyce, thank you. Patrick, you are incoming CEO for Sound Mental Health, and that's one of the aspects of this case that we're so concerned with. This tragedy in Orlando has been described properly as an act of terror, an act of hate, but we also know that this killer had a long history of red flags with aggression and domestic abuse and problems with threatening behavior in his professional education. For those of us who may have someone in our world who exhibits some of this behavior, what are we to do?
Well, as we're learning about this person, we don't know the whole story yet, and we'll learn more, but we need to pay attention and we need to reach out. And if it's family members, they need to do that. There are resources in this community, and if someone needs help, they need to reach out for help. I think with this person, we'll find there were probably things happening when he was very young, and you wonder, could the school system have reached out? And I think things are very different now where school staff are trained. I don't think there's anyone here tonight talking on behalf of the schools, but there are folks, there's partnerships with the schools who could reach out. So if a family member can't do it, us in the community, we have to do that. And if it's reaching out to community partners or law enforcement, we have to reach out and push.
I know you're also concerned about talking about mental health issues in the same breath with acts of violence. Explain why that concerns you.
Well, tonight we've heard a couple of times folks talk about this was it was a horrible thing that happened and very violent, but that doesn't mean that mentally ill folks or folks who struggle with mental illness are violent. Matter of fact, most individuals who have a mental illness or a drug and alcohol problem are not violent. And I think we need to remember that. Those are two very separate things.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the work you do. Joyce?
What are your reaction to his thoughts about mental health in our community, in our city? Mayor?
So it's pointing up a very important issue here. The issue I want to emphasize that he made is mentally ill people are not necessarily people who shoot guns. Right. And a lot of that goes on in Olympia, where I used to hang out a lot. I think the important thing here is we need to identify mental health issues and treat mental health issues. And I think that is often a different discussion than the discussion around guns. And we have a homeless problem in this city and in this nation we could talk about that is directly related to mental health. So again, to conflate the two is very, very dangerous.
30 seconds, your final thoughts as we move into Pride Week. In 30 seconds, Mayor.
If you see something you're concerned about, contact the police. Do not be afraid. Celebrate our diversity. This is a great city. This is a great region. Let's show the world who we are. Come out.
Isn't that wonderful? Let's show the world and come out. You've been a fantastic audience. I can't thank you all enough. I want to thank each and every one of our guests who came here today to share with us on a really personal level. We are so grateful on behalf of King 5. I want to say thank you. I want to tell you, too, at home, this ends our live broadcast, but we are going to be continuing our discussion online at king5.com, so keep your questions coming for Brian. I know you'll be taking those questions and comments, and we'll be sharing those comments on our live stream. Again, that's at king5.com. You can post to Twitter and to Facebook. And during this, not just this whole month of Pride and this Pride Week, but during this week of Pride and even beyond, shouldn't we embrace all the things that make us different and celebrate all the things that make us different? Shouldn't we? Shouldn't we be doing that? And most importantly tonight, I think that we want to remember the 49 victims, those innocent men and women whose lives were cut short by hate. Two songwriters out of California offer this tribute. This is Pulse. Good night.
So you say this is human, your heartbeat versus mine. I'm in chains 'cause I'm choosing, showing love or living life. I shouldn't have to leave where I stand. I shouldn't have to change who I am to count as a human. Feel my pulse. With your hand on my heart, you know it beats just as hard as yours. Feel my pulse. Oh, feel my pulse. Can't you see wish I could reach them. Strip away what separates. It's the same air we're breathing, same tears run down our face. So I don't have to leave where I stand, and I don't have to change who I am to count as a human. Feel my pulse with your hand on my heart. You know it beats just as hard as yours. Feel my pulse. Feel my pulse. Can't you see that I'm scarred? I'm just the same as you are, so just feel